I know that many of you are wondering if there is a faster way to set up a character. Well, the answer would be yes, there are faster ways. For example, you could have automated weights plus Armature Modifier plus Corrective Smooth Modifier. Or you could have a basic mesh deform setup for the body plus automated weights for face and hands plus Armature Modifier plus the Corrective Smooth Modifier. So those would be two ways in which you could speed up the process of getting a character working. The thing is that every workflow that you choose will have its pros and cons. So in these two methods I mentioned, you would be able to set up a character in 10 to 30 minutes. But then there will be lots of unpredictable things that may happen, because you can't rely 100% on automated weights, for example, because you won't know how the characters will deform until you start moving all the body parts. And also the Corrective Smooth Modifier, even though it is a great addition to Blender, because it dynamically smooths the mesh when it deforms in order to prevent deformations to be too different from the original shape of the mesh, so it will help you preserve details while smoothing out intersections and bad deformations. But the truth is that it isn't perfect either. Don't get me wrong here, because I do use it. But I've seen that when the basic deformation is not good enough, if you take a closer look at the geometry, you will find that many times vertices start jumping around when the joints articulate. So, using the Corrective Smooth Modifier also requires some previous work in order to prevent these errors that the modifier could produce. On the other hand, using the Corrective Smooth Modifier technique is also more CPU intensive, so by using it, you will certainly decrease the character's performance in real time, and you will be losing 5 to 10 frames per second on the animation playback. Therefore, even though all these automated methods are really tempting to use, the bad thing is that they will require you to do lots of corrections afterwards. And all these errors that you might eventually see will be a bit unpredictable, so you might come across errors at animation time or even worse, at rendering time. And that is surely an undesirable thing in a production pipeline. So, from my experience, and also from a personal preference, I like to have complete control over the development process of the character. That is, as I showed you in chapter 5 and 6, I like to manually tweak all the deformation of the mesh deform cage, and as you'll see in this chapter and in the next chapter, I'll also manually weight paint the hands and face of the character. This is because I prefer to have complete control over how the character deforms. By doing things this way, you might spend a lot more of time working on the character deformation, but you have the certainty that the character will deform correctly as you want it to deform, and that you won't come across unpredictable errors at rendering time. So you can do things one way or the other. All the ways are valid to me. In fact, in Caminandos 3, I used the Corrective Smooth Modifier as the main deformation technique for the penguins, along with mesh deform. But if you're talking about main characters, I prefer to do everything manually, to go painting vertex by vertex and to have complete control. But don't think I'm crazy. I don't like spending 30 hours working on a character. The idea is to do this once, and as we'll see in another series of tutorials, with BlenRig you can reuse all this work that you've done with the character for easily creating other characters. So, don't think I'm crazy, I'll do things in the manual way, but I'll get a great benefit afterwards, because I know I'll be able to kind of recycle the work I'm doing for creating other characters. Well, let's get on with our chapter now. As you have already seen, mesh deform is great for generic deformations. But in rigid places, or in small places like for instance the hands and the fingers, the mesh deform modifier doesn't work well enough. So in those places, we have to use the Armature Modifier. And that is in the head, the hands if they have fingers, and the feet if they have toes. So, for generating this division between the influences of the armature and the mesh deform modifiers, first I'm going to isolate the objects that I need, and in each object I'm going to add a new vertex group which I will call no MDF, that is no mesh deform. But you can call it whatever you want, I call it this way. After doing this, I'm going to add an armature modifier to each of the objects. So I add the armature modifier, and this modifier goes first in the stack. So I move it up, and then I select the BlenRig armature in the target field. And here's the reason why I split up this character in two main models, the head and the body separately. And it is because in the hands I will use the preserve volume option in the armature modifier, but I won't be using that option in the face. This is because the preserve volume option has a slight possibility of generating deformation artifacts with some rare combination of bone scaling and rotation. And as the facial rig is based on bone stretching, it is safer not to use that option with the face. So I will add an armature modifier in the head, but I won't click on the preserve volume option. So now I'm going to add the no MDF group to the vertex group field of the armature modifier, and I will also add it in the vertex group field of the mesh deform modifier, but with the invert option. If I move the armature now, everything looks the same, but if I go into weight painting mode and I start painting the no MDF group, you will notice that the vertices that I'm painting in red stop moving along with the rig. And this is because in the mesh deform modifier, I'm telling Blender that all the vertices that are not painted with the no MDF group should be deformed with the mesh deform modifier. And that corresponds to the blue vertices, because I clicked on the invert option. On the other hand, in the armature modifier, I'm telling Blender that the vertices that are painted with the no MDF group should be deformed with the armature. And as I currently don't have any weights assigned to deformation bones, the model is not deforming. So if I select the armature and enable the deformation layer, I can assign deformation weight to the hand. So I'm going to go into weight painting mode, and first I'm going to paint the whole hand with the deformation bone of the hand, which is called hand def L. This is just a temporary thing that will let me work on the no MDF group. When I paint the hand, you see that the vertices start following the armature. Here I'm also working with the X mirror option, so the other side of the model is also painted. When I move the hand, you see that there is a sharp division between the mesh deform modifier and the armature deformation. And this is because the no MDF group has a sharp end. So, first I'm going to overpaint a bit the deformation bone, so you notice that with the bone of the hand I also weight paint a bit the forearm, and then I'm going to edit the no MDef group to smooth out the transition between one modifier and the other. So I'll start tweaking this vertex group in order to produce a smooth fall off. I'll turn on the subsurf modifier in order to see the deformation better. And here I see that the wrist joint is separating too much, so I'll tweak a bit the realistic joint parameter for the wrists. Now I'm done with the hands and I'll go to the head. So first I'll paint the no MDef group. And now I'll paint the head with the head def master bone so that it deforms along with the armature. So now that it's deforming, I'm going to work on the transition of the no MDef group. Well, now that I'm done with the no MDF group, I can start with the real weight painting of the hand. So now I'm going to reduce the influence of the hand def L bone, because as I said, that was just a temporary solution for being able to work on the no MDF group. So this deformation bone will only have its influence in the area near the wrists. After doing that, I can start painting the phalanges. I'm gonna start with the little finger, and first I'm going to do a rough painting. So once I'm done, I'm gonna move the joint and see how it deforms. And I'm going to start mixing the weights between this bone and the other bone that is influencing the area, in this case, hand def L. What I do is to move the joints to an extreme position and weight paint in that position. So if the model is deforming correctly in that position, I know that it will deform correctly in any other intermediate position too. Now I will paint the finger roughly, and then I'll go adjusting the weight painting in more detail. But first I'm going to go out of weight painting mode a second, just to activate the fingers layer, so that I can move each individual joint. And I'll put each joint into a critical pose, and I'll adjust the weight painting there. As you see, when I rotate the joints, the fixed bones move away from the fingers, and if I weight paint those bones, I can preserve the volume of the joint. So, to put it in other words, I will go modeling the deformation by weight painting these bones. Here, again, I noticed that the separation between the bones is a little bit too high, so I will lower the realistic joints value for the fingers. Now I'll go on with the other phalanges. You can see how, thanks to these bones, the volume of the joint is preserved very well even in extreme poses. And here you see how the joint is preserving volume even in a 90 degrees rotation. And you can see that I was also able to kind of model a wrinkle on the skin, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. This takes patience and hard work, but it delivers the best possible results. Well, now I'm going to go out of weight painting mode just for a second to show you how deformation is going. As you can see, we have high quality deformations with no intersections, and the volume is preserved in all poses. So, in overall, what we have to do now is to paint the rest of the hand by following the exact same procedure. You see that this is just a matter of compensating the weights of one bone with the weights of another bone until you get the desired result. Let me say it again. The key aspect is to go solving the deformation in extreme poses and to weight paint the mesh so that it preserves volume correctly. You can achieve this by painting the extra deformation bones, which are these bones with the fixed suffix. And it is a good idea to do all this with subsurf enabled, so that you can have a clear picture of how the model will deform during rendering. So, I have finished painting the hand, and I will check deformation in the hand from the other side. I don't like how this is deforming, so I'll fix the weight here. I'm going to change a bit the values of the transformation constraints from the fixed bones of the wrists. And that's it! I'm glad with the overall deformation of the hands, so I'll see you in the next chapter where we will weight paint the face.